You're watching Slingshot The Podcast, the misunderstood voice, the culture's power. Today's episode is called The Courts Aren't All Bad. Hashtag Courts Matter. Thank you for joining us today. We're really happy that you're with us. We have an outstanding episode for you, and we want to get right into it because it is very important to our daily lives. Right. And I'm happy to be joined by my co-host for today, my partner in crime in all things, and Charles Gregory. Thank you for being here today.
Hey, we're in the building. Thanks for having me.
Loving the glasses today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I have too many of them. These are my favorite. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be honest with you, transparent. Yeah. These are probably the most inexpensive glasses that I own. And these are the pair of glasses that I always get compliments on.
Yeah. Hey, it doesn't have to cost a lot of money.
Hey, the other ones, they should know that. But no doubt. I'm happy to be here.
Well, today's episode is entitled that the courts aren't all bad. Hashtag Courts Matter.
Courts Matter.
Courts Matter. Hashtag Courts Matter. They absolutely do. So, when I say the words courts, either the eyes glaze over, people don't want to hear about it, or people have a really strong opinion and feeling about the court system. Mm-hmm. So, Charles Gregory.
Yeah.
When I say Pennsylvania court system to you, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? Scary.
Mandatory minimums, overcrowding, warehousing. We say Pennsylvania, that's what I think of.
What you think of?
100%, yeah. Maybe different now, but that's what our current DA is pretty decent. I like our current DA, but the past ones, that's the first thing that comes to mind if you ask me about courts.
So you like Larry Krasner?
I do. I actually like him. And there's no bias. He actually had the opportunity to come on our show. And the reason I like him is because I believe that he's fair. Mm-hmm. I believe that he gives both sides as to the best that he can. And he's not an extreme. I think that oftentimes we look for people in leadership hoping that they'll be the extreme in one way or the other. Mm-hmm. But I think he was good. He equalized the
fair.
Yeah, fair.
And he just won the primary election, so he will be on our general election ballot in November.
Woohoo! That's what's up.
Larry Krasner.
Yeah. Do we know the Republican candidate yet?
Absolutely. He is running unopposed. There is no Republican challenger.
Oh, well, then there you go. Larry Krasner. He will be
the next DA.
There we go. Okay,
unless there's some tremendous write-in campaign.
Yeah. It could happen. Yeah. The way the Democrats are having some issues lately, maybe.
You never know. Pittsburgh was rough.
That's right.
Primary election was rough for Pittsburgh.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So when you think about the courts, you think about it being scary.
Yes, very much so.
Any time in your life you ever thought the courts were important?
No.
Yeah.
No. Growing up, all you would hear is you go into court. Yeah. Chances are you're getting locked up. Fair but equal, non-existent. Yeah. You talk about justice is blind only when it comes to people who has a certain complexion. Yeah. So that's what I think.
Complexion for protection.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, the court system is made up of more than just the punitive court system.
True.
So we do have the appellate court system in Pennsylvania that has been protecting our rights and freedoms as of late. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's the first thing people think about, right? When they think about the court system, they think about incarceration, the carceral systems of our courts, and not so much the courts that can actually grant rights and freedoms.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But I think we talked about elections before, mm-hmm. and we talked about the importance of certain elections, mm-hmm. the presidential versus the primaries and things of that nature, right? I think there's a disservice of promotion for certain kind of levels and scopes of what courts are, right? Even what candidates are. But when we think about, we only think about, honestly, the criminal justice system, criminal court,
criminal
right?
Justice court, yeah.
And so maybe those other positions, those other courts, the other houses, that needs a little bit more amplification, which is pretty much what you're familiar with. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because we have judicial elections this year,
That's
and
right.
we need people to vote in them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if the connotation of courts is all negative, who wants to come out and vote for that?
Yeah, no, for sure.
Well, I'll say this. You spoke earlier about, courts scary.
Yeah.
Well, Pennsylvania is a very over-incarcerated state.
Yes.
It is actually one of the most incarcerated places on the planet. Pennsylvania.
Yes.
Not the country, the planet.
Yeah, Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. So I have some statistics because, I'm a numbers girl.
There you go.
So according to the Center for Rural Pennsylvania, as of 2023, nearly 3.37 million people, 26% of all Pennsylvanians live in rural counties in Pennsylvania. So we're talking about Elk County, Clarion County, Venango County, places most folks who are probably watching today have never been.
Never heard of, not even heard of it, but for sure.
Yeah. So these are, one of the 67 counties, some of the 67 counties that exist in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
In the last few years, rural Pennsylvania's population has become more racially diverse, as communities of color are the only growing population in Pennsylvania. And some of the population growth related to people of color, and more specifically, Black people, is due to the majority of Pennsylvanians' prisons located in rural Pennsylvania.
Wow.
And those people incarcerated within those facilities in rural Pennsylvania.
Unbelievable.
Another stat here.
Unbelievable.
It's a lot of people.
Unbelievable. See, and you asked me what I thought or what I think about.
Yeah.
And I think of mass incarceration, warehousing, and overcrowding.
Yeah. Well, according to prisonpolicy.org, Pennsylvania has an incarceration rate of 589 per 100,000 people. So for every 100,000 people in Pennsylvania, 589 of them are incarcerated. And this includes prisons, jails, immigration detention, and juvenile justice facilities, meaning that it locks up a higher percentage of people than most any other democratic country on earth.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, we lock up a lot of people.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are approximately a total of 96 state prisons and county jails in Pennsylvania, with 19 state prisons located in rural Pennsylvania, making Pennsylvania one of the most incarcerated states in the country, with more than 66,000 Pennsylvanians residing in jails or prisons.
Unbelievable. I mean, we have to stop and ask ourselves, or ask, Pennsylvania, what's going on here? Something wrong.
Yeah.
What is it? And then the other statistic I would ask then would be the following question. Out of all of those people, what percentage is Black?
Yeah.
Or people of color?
Yeah. Well, before we go to break, I want to lift up one important thing.
Yeah.
And that is that Pennsylvania voters are powerful. We are one of only 7 states in the entire country where voters of Pennsylvania get to elect every single one of our judges and justices. Every single one. And when I think about that, I think about the case of Meek Mill, rapper Meek Mill. Yeah. And that he, obviously had gone through the criminal justice system in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And it was, as we talk about, not all courts are bad. It was the Pennsylvania Supreme Court that fast-tracked his case to be heard.
Yeah.
That allowed for him to be freed.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah.
And we know that there was a judge that kind of made Meek Mill's life a little hard, I'll say. Wouldn't allow for him to travel in certain places and conduct his business. Yeah. And that judge, she was ran out of the criminal justice system in Philadelphia.
Great.
To the point that folks advocated to ensure she did not run for a retention election, which would put her back on the bench for another 10 years. So she is out of that.
Deuces.
Yeah.
Goodbye. Close the door.
But what's so interesting is I would love to talk to Meek Mill. Love to have Meek Mill on the show. And ask him,
come on the show.
Right?
Come on, Cletus, come on the show. We need to talk to you.
Would love to ask him. Did he vote in the judicial election? Because he had the power to put that judge on a bench or take that judge off of a bench.
Yeah. No, that's cool. And this is not to take any flowers away from Meek, but I do want to see people like that who may not have that celebrity status for certain things to happen for them too. But it is what it is. I mean, we'll sit on that he got his due diligence and the justice served for him. And we go from there.
Yeah, due process was served.
That's right.
All right, well, we're going to take a break and we'll be right back. You're watching Slingshot the Podcast, the misunderstood voice, the culture's power, at New Millennium Multimedia Studios. Welcome back. Happy to have you. This episode today is entitled "The Courts Aren't All Bad." #Courts Matter. Mm-hmm. And so as we get into the second segment of today's episode, I really want to talk about the importance of the courts that can protect our rights and freedoms in Pennsylvania. Yeah. So that we can recognize that all courts are not bad, right? There are some courts, particularly in Pennsylvania, who have been protecting our rights and freedoms, especially in the last few years.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. We want to hear them.
All right. Well, how do the courts protect our rights and freedoms? Let's think about what rights and freedoms we care about the most. I'm going to go here. Charles Gregory.
Okay.
What rights and freedoms do you care about the most?
My right for freedom. We want our freedom. We want to stay as a civilian out and not be incarcerated unjustly. And I think that's something that has been happening a long time as it relates to like our people, right? We talk about just illegal stop and frisks, right? They stop us, they frisk us, and they come up with some type of idea to say that, something is wrong and you need to come with us, right? Get locked up, get caught up in the system, other things come up, and now we're stuck there, right? And I think that, if you have, and again, the people in blue, right? They're not all bad, so I don't want to put that out there because I have family who are part of the people in blue, right? But I think that certain times if you have maybe a new recruit that's out of their neighborhood and they don't understand how to handle certain people that don't look like them, sometimes they get a little overzealous, right? One thing leads to another. Now you kind of force people to act a certain way. Now you have a reason to lock them up, right? And so we go in there, we sit and rot, and some of us don't even have the funds to get out, to post bail, and then that's where we at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have a son.
Yes.
And, there's some rights and freedoms I'm sure you want protected for him.
Absolutely.
Some of those being clean air and water.
That's right.
We have that right in Pennsylvania. It's part of the Pennsylvania Constitution.
School, too. Yeah.
Schools, we want our schools to be funded
That's
equitably, right? And
That's
that
right.
Your child's school is equivalent to the school in Lower Merion.
That's right.
Right?
Jeez. Won't happen, but yeah.
Well, the court just recently ruled that it should.
Oh, well, I wish I had my round of applause. Shout out to that. Shout out to the courts.
Yeah. It was the Commonwealth Court in Pennsylvania that said fund those schools equitably.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
It means that you should not, the school funding should not be dictated based upon property taxes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
That there should be more funding for public education in Pennsylvania, and that it shouldn't be dictated on the size of your house.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to get in a little bit of history here because I'm a history buff. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the court system. And maybe that's going to be a way that we're going to have Pennsylvanians come out in November and vote in this November election. Because in odd years, it is a judicial election year. And as I mentioned, Pennsylvania voters are very powerful. We're one of only 7 states in the entire country in which we, the voter, get to put judges on benches or take them off of benches every odd year. So we must use this power before we lose this power. So I'm going to go back a little bit, right? Let's do a little Civics 101, what we learned in the 8th grade or the 10th grade or the 12th grade. And we learned that there are 2 systems, right? So we learned about federalism, that there's a federal court system and there's a state court system. The federal court system is the one you probably know about the most because that's what's on our TV news, right? We hear about the Supreme Court of the United States and what they're doing or not doing. What we don't hear so often is what it is the Pennsylvania court system is doing, particularly the appellate courts and the intermediate appellate courts in Pennsylvania. So historically, Pennsylvania has a long history of a judicial system. Pennsylvania is the birthplace of American democracy. We absolutely have the oldest Supreme Court in the nation, older than the United States Supreme Court in Pennsylvania. And so that makes Pennsylvania voters, again, very powerful. Pennsylvania's Supreme Court was founded in 1722. It is very old. It is very old.
Yeah.
And there are 7 justices that sit on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court compared to 9 justices that sit on the United States Supreme Court. So 2 less justices in the federal governments. Right now in Pennsylvania, 5 of the elected justices on the Supreme Court are Democrats, and 2 of them were elected as Republicans. And they serve 10-year terms, different than the federal United States court, in which they're there for a lifetime and can sit on the bench till they're 95 years old or beyond.
It's crazy.
In Pennsylvania, there is an age out for them and beyond a certain age. Also, we elect them to 10-year terms. And then we have the opportunity as Pennsylvanians to retain them for another 10-year term. And that can happen until they age out.
Wow.
So that's what's different about the Pennsylvania Supreme Court and the United States Supreme Court. Now, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court must honor the Constitution of Pennsylvania. And most folks don't even recognize we have a Constitution in Pennsylvania. It's not just the United States Constitution that we were forced to learn, right, in grade school. Pennsylvania has a Constitution. And in our Pennsylvania Constitution, we are guaranteed by our Constitution clean air and water, one of our rights and freedoms. Now, this year, 2025, our Pennsylvania Supreme Court, 3 of the justices of the 7 are up for retention election. It just so happens those 3 were all elected as Democrats 10 years ago, and now they are up for retention election. Why is this important? Why does this matter? In the last several years, Pennsylvania has been very litigious. And when I say that, I mean that there have been a lot of court cases around our voting rights in Pennsylvania. And it has been the Pennsylvania Supreme Court for the last several years that have ruled in favor of more access to the ballot. They have gotten rid of gerrymandered maps that took away voting power of Black and brown people and said, let's make these maps more fair, and ensured that we had better congressional maps to vote with. And this was just recently, right? This is in the last 7 years. So this is what this Supreme Court has been able to do. Additionally, if you think about the 2020 election, the entire world was waiting on Pennsylvania's results in 2020. We were waiting on Pennsylvania and what the election results were going to look like.
Yes, we were.
And it was the Pennsylvania courts, the appellate courts, that determined that provisional ballots should count, that we should have better access to vote by mail, that should not be dissolved. It was the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, the Pennsylvania Commonwealth Court that made that so. And so that is why it's important today that we vote in these elections. And we vote to ensure that we keep judges on the bench or justices on the bench who are going to continue to protect our rights and our freedoms. And I will tell you, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has been under attack the last several years. There's been attempts to impeach our Pennsylvania Supreme Court justices, just like there was an attempt, and a successful attempt actually, to impeach Larry Krasner, right? He was not removed from position, but he was absolutely impeached. They did the same thing to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. That failed. There's also been attempts to change the way we as powerful Pennsylvania voters get to elect the judges and justices in Pennsylvania. Charles Gregory, do you know that you get to, if you live in Pennsylvania long enough, born and raised here?
Yeah.
So
I wasn't born here, but I was definitely raised here.
Raised here.
Yeah.
So you've been here since you were 18?
I've been here, I've been here since I was 2.
Okay. So you've been here long enough that you almost have had the chance to vote for all 31 appellate court judges. You had that power to put all 31 appellate court judges on the bench. Yeah. So, I don't want to ask the question. I'll come back to you later.
Yeah, let's keep it going.
So you had that opportunity. Well, they wanted to gerrymander the judiciary, and this was back in 2019 all the way through 2021, attempts in Harrisburg to gerrymander the judiciary and change it so that you could not vote for 31 judges and justices, only 3.
So real quick, I want to stop you there, just to hold you there, because I know it's people that's very curious who keep saying gerrymandering, right? For those who don't truly understand what that word means, can you explain that?
Yeah.
Sure.
Gerrymandering is when elected officials choose their constituency, not us as the elected, the electorate choosing our elected officials. It's where legislators create the maps that are used for us to vote. So depending upon where you live in the city, like if you're in Philadelphia, you may have Dwight Evans as your congressperson, or you may have somebody else, depending upon how the maps are drawn. So it was the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania that said our maps were gerrymandered. They were drawn by legislators to protect their re-elections and their friends' re-elections. So the maps were drawn in a way that it did not service particularly Black and brown folks. And they call them gerrymandered because it is when legislators draw maps to benefit them and not for the benefit of us as the electorate.
Absolutely. So in other words, they kind of like was padding.
Yeah.
Padding making sure that they got the edge.
Right.
So that's what that means. Absolutely.
Yeah.
For sure.
And so that was the second attempt.
Yeah.
So the first attempt was to impeach them. It didn't work. It failed. The second attempt was to gerrymander the judiciary and change the way we as the powerful voters get to vote for all of the judges in Pennsylvania. The third attempt is what's happening this year. And it's an anti-retention campaign where there are rich people, and when I say rich, I mean like the richest man in Pennsylvania, Jeffrey Yaz, who wants to put not all of his money because he got too much of it.
I didn't even know that.
But he wants to put a lot of his money towards an anti-retention campaign so that you, the voter, will choose to vote no to retain these judges and these justices in particular that voted to throw out gerrymandered maps. So we have that power this November to say we want to retain these justices. We want to give them another 10 years. They've been doing a good job. We should give them another 10 years.
So will that be one of the questions that will be on there, which is important that a lot of people kind of pass by, and that is written in a way that people will understand?
Correct. Yeah. It is a very simple question to read. Now, whether or not you know what to do when you see the question is another thing. So what you'll see on your ballot when you vote on November 4th, or maybe you vote earlier because you're voting by mail, you're going to see the name of 3 justices. You're not going to see the political party in which elected them, right? You're not going to see the D or R after their name. You're just going to see the judge's name. You're going to see what county they're from in Pennsylvania. And then you're going to have circles to fill in, particularly depending upon where you live in Pennsylvania, circles to fill in to say yes, retain them, or no, not to retain them. That's all you'll see. But here's the problem. It's towards the bottom of the ballot.
There you go.
People usually vote at the top. We have the mayoral elections this year and city council and other things. So people start at the top. They see the judges and they blank out. Blank
out because they're not aware. They don't understand or even know who is this. So they tend to vote names that they kind of feel like they feel. I will almost guarantee you if one of the judges have a name as Johnson.
Yes.
Johnsons, Williams,
right?
That type of thing. For sure. Yeah.
I mean, that's what I did when I moved back to Pennsylvania from North Carolina. I moved back in 2017. It was a judicial election year. I saw all these names on my ballot. I know who these folks are. I mean, they don't knock on your door to campaign. That's not what judges do, right? So you don't know who these folks are. So unless you're attending some kind of town hall or candidate forum, you may never meet a judge that's running for office. And I did the same thing that you probably do. I would see the names and I would say, this one sounds black.
This sounds black, yeah. Who are you voting for? Anybody black.
Right. Or that's a woman. Maybe this woman might have, a better understanding of what I want for my rights and my freedoms. Check.
Yeah, maybe, for sure.
But I'll say this, not all skin folk are kinfolk.
That part, I need another round of applause for that because we found out very quickly during this last election that every skin folk ain't our kinfolk, and we have to be aware of that because we're not all monoliths, right?
Right.
And so we need to be more cognizant and more researched as it relates to who we want to support and endorse for our leadership.
Right. Well, we have important decisions to make, Pennsylvanians. So if you're watching from outside of Pennsylvania, but you have family here in Pennsylvania, you tell them to get to the polls this November and vote in this judicial election because it matters. These courts matter. They're making determinations and decisions about our lives. It doesn't have to be the worst day in your life. It could be the day that you adopt a child and the court gave you custody of a child. It could be the day you won custody of a child. It could grant you a divorce and you really wanted to be divorced, right? So the courts could actually be one of the better days in your life. And we do need to make sure we're voting in every single judicial election because they matter. And the turnout rate is so low that you allow for a very small minority of people to determine who sits on our benches. Yeah. All right, we're going to take a little break and come right back. And we're going to come back to more Courts Matter because we need to make sure we are out here exercising our rights and freedoms while we still have them. You're watching Slingshot The Podcast. This is more than just a podcast. This is a movement to inspire and motivate and mobilize. This is for those whose voices have been unheard, misunderstood, undervalued, and underserved. We're going to talk about sports, culture, entertainment, and we're going to use this to build power in our communities. All right, welcome back. We're still on this. We're still on Courts Matter. We're still on the courts aren't all bad, and they matter, and we need to vote in these elections while we still can. So I was talking about the retention election this November 4th, or before if you're voting by mail. So I want to give you the names of the 3 current Pennsylvania Supreme Court justices who will be on your ballot. So when you go and vote for mayor, wherever you live in Allentown, or you go and you vote for city council, depending upon where that is, Delaware County, wherever. Besides that on your ballot, you're going to see these judges and justices, some who were running for the first time, and so they're looking to sit on a bench for a 10-year term or a 6-year term if they're a very lower court. And you're going to see the retention elections that is a simple yes or no answer. And you will not see anything besides these folks' names, what county they're from, and do you want to retain them or not. So there's not some kind of confusing question that's being asked. It's a simple yes or no to retain. So the 3 justices that you'll see on your ballot on November 4th.
All right, welcome through it.
All right, here they go. The first one is Kevin Doherty. He's out of Philadelphia, part of the Doherty family, if you're familiar with Philadelphia. He is up for retention. He was originally elected in 2015, so he's up for a 10-year retention. The other is David Weck, also like Kevin Doherty, elected as a Democrat. He is up for retention election. And the third is Christine Donahue, who I actually got to meet a couple months ago out in, Lebanon County, right? I'm out in rural PA. Met her out there at a function. She is currently living in the Pittsburgh area, and she is up for retention election. So these are the 3. These are the 3 that have said our maps are not right. These are the 3 that have said count this person's ballot. These are the 3 that have ensured that our voices are being heard at the ballot box. And these 3 are up for retention election on November 4th.
So these are people that we can pretty much say they are in our favor.
I would say these 3 are in our favor.
Okay, cool.
And I say this because we will be in a judicial crisis in Pennsylvania if Jeffrey Gaz and these other billionaires get their way. We'll be in a judicial crisis because these 3 justices will come off the bench because they're not running against anybody. They're only running for retention to stay on the bench. So if by chance the rich folks win, that dark money comes in and they get people to turn out to vote and we sit home, these 3 justices will be taken off of the bench and not replaced, right? Because the only way to replace them is for our governor, a democratically elected governor, to temporarily put a judge or a justice on a bench. But in order to make that happen, the Pennsylvania Senate has to agree. And to get the Pennsylvania Senate to agree with the governor, we've got a better shot maybe at winning the Powerball.
Pretty much. So for those, I say for those in the favor of the common folk, how about that? We nonpartisan, so it'd be in the favor of the common folk. All right. And so, but if you, maybe not so much if you big business about that money and don't care about the common folk, then, you may not want these 3 people in. Just saying.
Right.
Just saying.
And more quick to say, you should be voting your values, right? What do you value? Do you value your voting rights? Do you value an equitable public education for your child? Do you value clean air and water? If you value these things, then you determine what you want to value and you cast your ballot on November 4th.
That's right. It will behoove you to cash in your ballot.
Right.
That's right.
All right. So the last thing I want to talk about, because this episode has gone by really fast. Because there's a lot of good information. And believe me, I haven't even touched on all of the things. So I'm sure I'm going to come back and talk about this again before November. Because I want us to be refreshed to remember to do this. Right? Get that muscle memory up because we cannot afford for 25% turnout. We cannot afford for 30% turnout. We need to turn out in this election the same way Wisconsin turned out in their judicial election.
Wisconsin turned out. They have a special community out there, though. They have a special energy out there that I don't think we have here.
Well, we got to match it. We better start matching some energies. So I'm going to close out by talking about one of my favorite people who ever walked the planet, and particularly here in Pennsylvania. And that is Miss Viviette Applewhite. And we're going to show you a picture of Miss Viviette Applewhite. And the picture we're showing you of Miss Viviette Applewhite is her 100th birthday.
Wow. Shout out to her.
All right. Born in Philadelphia. And Miss Viviette Applewhite, she has voted in voted in every single election since FDR in the 1940s. That's how long she had been voting.
Wow.
Right? Well, Miss Viviette Applewhite was the lead litigant in a case to say that a more restrictive voter ID law that folks in Harrisburg were looking to move in 2012. She was the lead litigant to say that this more restrictive voter ID law was going to stop her in her record of voting in every single election because it was going to ask and require of her a type of ID that she just didn't have access to. So you saw Miss Vivian Applewhite. We can't really imagine that she's going to be still driving at this point. So she's probably not going to the DMV. And standing in line at the DMV for 2 and 3 hours is not going to be on her list of things to do. She's probably not burning up the internet, so she's probably not online able to access any type of information online, unless she has someone helping her, and hopefully they know, but maybe not. We think about Black folks in particular, born in the early 1900s, likely not born in a hospital, likely not having access to a birth certificate. These were all the things that were going to add up to stop Miss Vivian Applewhite from actually casting her ballot. And so as the lead litigant in a 2012 lawsuit, she was the winner.
Wow.
She was the winner.
That's amazing.
And the courts declared, they determined, they ruled that her vote needs to count and that a more restrictive voter ID was going to jeopardize her access to the ballot. Mm-hmm. And that was a case decided by the Commonwealth Court. So we've got, intermediate courts here. We got the Superior Court, we've got the Commonwealth Court, and the Supreme Court. So courts matter.
Wow, that's crazy.
Courts matter, right? It's not just all about, the cases that are going to get you popped and put you into a jail or a prison. It's about the courts that can actually protect our rights and our freedoms to allow us to have our rights to vote.
So she went through 2 wars, 3.
World
War II.
She saw a lot.
Vietnam War.
She might have been around for the First World War, to tell you the truth.
Sheesh, yeah.
Yeah. War of 1912.
1930. That was Franklin D. Roosevelt? Was that Roosevelt?
Yeah, she voted in every election since the 40s. World War II was, yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
It's a long time.
Wow, that's a long time.
Yeah, she's recently passed away, not too long, several years ago.
Bless her soul.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right, Philadelphia represent.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right. Well, I want to thank you all for being with us today and hearing me out. I know these courts aren't the sexiest subject, and they need to be. We need to make them so sexy that we can't wait to get to the polls on November 4th and vote in the judicial election. Our rights and freedoms are on the line, and we can't allow for a small minority of people to show up to the polls because some rich man told them to. We need to be showing up to these polls and voting in these elections like they matter, because they do. Elections matter, courts matter. Thanks for joining us today, everybody. Have a good one. I'm Kadida Kenner, and you're watching Slingshot the Podcast, the misunderstood voice, the culture's power.